We're going to be going live. All right, we are live. All right, good morning. We are back in Senate Judiciary. It is January 8th, and we are taking up the confirmation of Judge Ouyang. And just some quick housekeeping things, since we're live and the public is listening. I just want folks to know that moving forward with applications, one minor change is that the dates of birth on these applications will be redacted for all appointees who come before us. And the second housekeeping piece, and also these applications will be posted on our committee page shortly for any folks who want to review them. And the second piece, I also handed out to committee members the statutory requirements that the Judicial Nominating Board follows when going through the confirmation process. Senator Norris and I are very familiar with them as we go to those meetings often. But for the public who may be listening, when the Judicial Nominating Board is going through this process, we look to make sure that the applicants are meeting a number of criteria, and those criteria are listed in Title 4, Statute 602. And the summarized version of attributes are integrity, legal knowledge and ability, judicial temperament, impartiality, communication capability, financial integrity, work ethic, and administrative capabilities, and important experience. And any other attributes that the board deems. So with that being said, we can get started with the judge. And if you'd like to join us and provide us with an introduction, then I may have some questions from the committee.
Very good. Thank you. That's some notes on my phone. I'm not texting the phone. The phone's been working. But good morning. Thanks for the time this morning. My name is Colin Ouyang. I've met some of you before on the game. I thought I would just say a few words about information that's not on my materials, since I know you have them, and I will spare you having to read here, which you've already read. But the governor appointed me on October 6th, and sort of since that time, I have completed the court sort of standard 5 to 6 week orientation and training program, and have then been assigned to sit in the civil docket in Chittenden, so the Main Street Courthouse in Dodge. I've also been covering cases from Orange and Caledonia, Grand Isle, and Orleans counties, just basically by way of rounding out the docket and helping out as I get up to speed. My family and I live in Shelburne. My wife is the chief of the newborn ICU at UVM. She also teaches at medical school there. We have 3 sons. Our oldest is 25, who works in finance in New York. Our middle son is 22, who's teaching snowboarding at Smugs and working at a restaurant in Charlotte. And our youngest is in 6th grade at Shelburne Community School. We've been lucky enough to live here in Vermont for the last 10 years or so. I moved here for work-related reasons. I grew up in central Massachusetts in Worcester County, where my parents raised both my brother and me. My older brother lives down in Salt Lake City. He's had a very interesting career, both in business and in film. I have more degrees. He has really more of everything else. Both my parents were teachers. My father spent his career at a school called Worcester Polytech Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts. He was a professor of electrical engineering. My mother spent most of her career at a college called Emmanuel College in Boston, where she taught music. And then for her pre-retirement last gasp, she moved with my dad, dragged into California. She was dean at what used to be called Humboldt State University before retiring. They both were born in China. They fled the Civil War there, moved halfway around the world, start new lives in Massachusetts, where they learned new languages and raised my older brother. And they, both my mom and my dad, all of their siblings spent their lives and careers devoted to their families, either as teachers, members of the clergy or the church, in medicine, or working for the government. And I'm very, very grateful to obviously have the opportunity to return to public service and do something that we now consider our adopted status. I'm happy to take questions or say more, but like I said, I figured I'd pause there. The rest of my professional materials are in the application. I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Thank you. Sarah.
Welcome, first of all, and thank you for stepping up to this role. I would say I'm very impressed with your qualifications, but also with your prose, your lyrical expressions here. I happen to be a writer myself, so that's what I'd like to ask you about. You refer to walking between worlds, and also that you've felt the power of the law firsthand, not in a positive way. I'm wondering if you can just talk about that and flesh that out.
Sure. I mean, I think personally, as the son of immigrants, one of the things that my parents taught us was the value of kind of fitting in. And as a former grade school teacher myself, just for a year, I learned when we interview kindergarten coming in, part of the social skills we look for is how well do they get along with others on the playground. And I think in that sense, although it's less positive word today, I think assimilation is a helpful life skill for learning how to fit in. But we like the way we look in the world that we live in. So, I think the one experience that's most memorable for me is that as a child, we were doing a little bit of a road trip to visit our family, our extended family, my dad's sisters in particular. And we were going across the Canadian border through Niagara Falls on our way to Ohio. And my dad, being the careful, cautious engineer he was, of course, carried all his paperwork, but he didn't carry the written most, he carried copies. Well, you may know if you make copies of your green card paperwork, it is literally a felony to have now made that copy of misconstrued as a counterfeit. That's even presented at the border. We were detained for what is officially called secondary inspection, which in the eyes of a child is officially called sit in the car quietly while your mom loses her mind and your dad is taken by, armed agents for what felt like a very long period of time. Having prosecuted cases arising out of facts like that, I understand why the border agents do that. That's part of their job. And to be clear, my dad was treated very professionally. It was an experience I still remember to this day. I've been very clear with my sons. Anytime we're crossing the border, we're always got our paperwork in order. We're very clear about how you behave when you're speaking to the border, how dangerous that stop is, just like any stop in an automobile. They're educated very clearly on where to keep their hands when they're pulled over for all the right reasons. It's a very difficult part of life. It is a reality. And we are human beings, and people form judgments based on what they see and hear. That's a natural part of being humans. However, the more you can make life as comfortable and as possible for anyone involved, the less stress there is. So it doesn't mean that there's no stress. And so I'd say that's kind of my first interaction with it really didn't matter that I was who I thought I was. I realize now I'm looking in the mirror to realize others.
Right. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. Obviously, Senator She and myself do sit on the judicial nominating board. So I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate you on your appointment.
No, thank you, sir.
I wish you well in the future. And I think that you're a great candidate, great choice. Your honor.
Thank you very much.
Senator.
Thank you for being here. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about some of the cases you prosecuted, both as a U.S. attorney and an assistant U.S. attorney. The things that sort of jumped out at me are the prosecutions of prostitution and immigration. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So in Washington, D.C., and you may know this, so sorry if it's a repetitive, the U.S. Attorney's Office is a little bit different, right? Because we treat as a country the District of Columbia as almost a colony, right? So it doesn't have a full-fledged state and local government. So its superior court is very much like our superior court. It deals with primarily state level offenses. So even though I was a federal prosecutor there, I was in essentially the equivalent of the state court. So the cases involving prostitution at the time, the focus of the police department was on using undercover police officers to catch the Johns in certain neighborhoods because, as you may know, neighborhoods where that crime is frequent, which it was in the case there, creates a really bad impact for the quality of life of the residents and those neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods tend not to be higher income, they tend not to be affluent, they tend not to be empowered. Police officers were regularly in those neighborhoods, and the defendants were the Johns. I can't recall a case where there was where we were targeting the prostitutes themselves. I have obviously had drug cases where people are involved in that human trafficking as a result of their drug dependencies. So that would be the bulk of the prostitution cases. For the immigration offenses, those are predominantly in Boston, as not necessarily the traditional U.S. Attorney's Office. But at the time, the screening criteria for those cases were only people who had illegally re-entered after having received a prior federal felony conviction. Okay, so people had come once, committed a felony in our country, had been convicted by our system, and then deported, and then they came out. And so we would handle cases that said these are illegal re-entries with prior felony convictions. None of them went to trial. They were almost all like freedom, but it was necessary for the
Understandable. It sounds like they were fairly complex cases in both instances.
In both cases, they weren't the standard kind of case. And I think in the scheme of things, most seasoned prosecutors wouldn't say they're most complex, but they're high volumes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Senator Maddox?
I just got a quick one. First, I have a one-year-old and a 3-year-old,
Oh,
and I wouldn't mind if you gave a big thank you to your wife as the chief of the NICU, because both my boys spent a little brief time in the NICU when they were born. So it was an amazing experience in that unit, and it was fantastic. But getting back on track of your work, I'm just curious. It's always nice to have fresh eyes coming into the judicial system, and you've been in Chittenden County and Orleans County and Essex County. Can you speak a little bit about like the differences of what you see between the different counties and just what you've noticed between the different counties? You know, maybe it's the types of cases that you hear and things like that.
sure. I mean, I have cases in all those counties, but I wouldn't say I've been to any of them except Chittenden and really had a feel for it. I guess my initial observations as a person who's been here for, a couple of topics is every county is, quite different. I think it's driven by obviously the population and the nature of the cases. So just in terms of the caseload, obviously there's more people in Chittenden County. On the civil side, there's different cases. More businesses are located in Chittenden County. So I think on average, we'll probably see more commercial litigation in other parts of the state. I think what I'm seeing in other parts of the states and what I've heard is you see the kinds of disputes that you would expect in a rural state. There are a lot of disputes over property values and rights of way.
Yeah.
Because as you know well, someone owned a farm a long time ago and made it into some kind of subdivision. And the history of the deeds goes back hundreds of years and what people said and meant versus what they wrote down. So certainly on the cases I have, there's a number of these disputes. And I would say the culture probably reflects what you would expect. Again, every county in Vermont, in some ways, is a little bit of a different planet. I think that's a great thing. And part of the challenge and was excitement for someone in the Superior Court is you do get to rotate around in assignments, and you get to sort of see sort of local.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes we don't want to lose sight in this building of that a blanket approach doesn't always work, in that there are differences, even if we're just going 50 miles north or whatever the distance may be. So I was just curious about your interaction so far.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know that you've been assigned to the civil division in Chittenden County, but in sort of glancing over your background, it seems like you have a lot of experience in sort of environmental issues. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about our environmental court system and ways we might improve that, or things that are working really well there.
I don't have any interesting thoughts at all.
Okay.
I have to say that it was in the process of applying and sort of being in Vermont that I recognized that we have this new structure. In Massachusetts, where I spent part of my career, we had a special division in Superior Court called the Business Litigation Section, which is self-explanatory. I understand now, having been involved, why we have the environmental division. I think it's probably a good idea for those reasons. But candidly, I really don't know enough about it to offer any kind of opinions.
That's fair.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you might be able to expand a bit on some of your other experience that I'm seeing in your resume, mainly because I'm sure that folks who might be listening and looking at your resume might be wondering how your experience with Velco or Franklin Energy or National Grid is applicable to your current role with the judge. And so could you share some more as to how that experience connects to what you're doing now?
Sure. I mean, it's not the career path. I don't know what career path I anticipated for myself, but I don't think I thought I would be going in-house. The reason I went in-house was, a variety of reasons, but what I realized by going in-house was that it was important to sort of step back from just being a lawyer, right? Because once you go to work for a company, you're part of the legal department, the department's part of a larger company. And I found that it was great to be reminded of, yeah, lawyers have their strengths. They also have their blind spots. You have to face them in their training. And that's true of engineers or accountants or accounting. But for enterprise to make a decision, it's important to bring all those perspectives to the table to make the best decision. And so I really feel like, what that taught me is the value of listening for the unspoken, because just like now, where when I'm on the bench, there's an interpreted hierarchy. And I have to expect that people are going to respect that, which means that they may not always speak candidly about what they are thinking, which may mean I miss the opportunity to hear something or don't know to ask something because I won't know. So I learned those skills of, I would say, listening between the words in a corporate environment where I held senior positions over hundreds of thousands of people who obviously I wanted their different opinions. But not everyone's going to tell their boss to disagree with them very, very readily. So that needed to be cultivated. But I would say that's sort of one set of people skills that I developed in private sector management. But I think if you don't sit in those shoes, you don't want that. The other part is kind of management. Right? I spent some time in corporate strategy in those roles. So part of that is setting objectives across an enterprise. And at the time, National Grid was 17,000 employees in the US. About 200 in the legal department. To get 200 people even to go in the same direction is not easy and it's not incidental. So to set objectives, that makes sense for the organization, that makes sense for the department, that makes sense for me as their leader, a talented line lawyer who also has to find their way through all that. I think that kind of organizational management skill kind of is also very helpful. And then the last bit I'll say is utilities are regulated. So although they are private sector, Velco is interesting and different in the sense that it is privately held, but ultimately all of its earnings go back to Vermont customers. So there's very much a public spirit, and you learn the value and benefit of what's in the interest of the private shareholder, what can you justify to the customer, and what would make sense for the regulator so the regulator can do their job. And I think understanding really how public-private partnerships can work effectively and not so effectively. Those perspectives that I've learned in those experiences.
Thank you. And one more question that's much more general and broad, pertaining to your perspective and approach on the bench. I know that in the civil division, there are these situations where one party may have representation. I'm thinking of landlord-tenant issues. Typically, where a landlord has the means to have representation, and on the other side, you may have a tenant who is pro se. And so, when you have these parties from a variety of different socioeconomic backgrounds in front of you, what is your general approach and perspective in how you handle this?
I think generally it's the part of what I was saying before, right? So the benefit of time will, I think, overcome a lot, which is I need to let whoever it is, whether they're a lawyer or not, but particularly if they're not, time to sort of say their piece. It helps me see where they're coming from. And importantly, it should help them feel that they've had their time before they're getting the court to say whatever they feel like they need to say, whether it's legally relevant or not. So there's that I think can only be solved by having time, which, as you know, is part of the reason that drives case time increase. I think that's inevitable because if you don't give them the time, they're not going to leave feeling like they've been heard. I will miss possibility, something that I would not have asked with my narrow legal lens on that they feel is relevant. So at the end of the day, I'm probably trying the patience of the lawyer representing the other party. I think those lawyers know well what the judges are trying to do. At the same time, I'm sure I'm also partly frustrating the unrepresented party or the party representing themselves because they may come. So yesterday was a good example. 13 status conferences. I think every case, one or all sides were unrepresented. But all they know is they're coming to court. And then they know it's a status conference, but they don't know that it's on for 10 minutes and what a status conference is versus a formal hearing on the merits. So they come with all of their paperwork thinking that we're going to make a final decision. It takes more than 10 minutes for me to explain what a status conference is in a way that is respectful to where they're starting from. And I'm a work in progress. I don't do it perfectly every time. I learn every time that I could have done it differently and better. And I hope always to do so. But I would say that's generally my approach, for instance.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any other questions? All right, great. Well, thank you and congratulations. Good to see you again. And so this is the practice with all confirmation appointees. After this initial meeting, we leave it, I guess, on the wall, you would say, for about a week, and that allows the public to provide any input. And then, and so a week from now, barring any unforeseen circumstances, we'll vote and continue forward.
Very good. Thank you all for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, committee, we will be back at 10:30 to hear from Judge Zillman. Right.